There are two drug lords, see who reigns in history. I will present to you the case of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, a 5'6" man out of Badiraguato, Mexico. He was born, we don't know, maybe in 1957, maybe in 1954. Important to note, at this point in his life, Chapo Guzman, Pablo Escobar had been dead for already well over a decade. He's worth somewhere around $5 billion to the best of our knowledge, and as we just noted, he was arrested last week.
Now, Pablo Escobar, almost the same height, you'll notice, 5'5", born in Rio Negro, Colombia, 1949. His cartel is Medellin, probably the most infamous cartel of all time. Net worth estimated at $25 billion. That's probably just what they could track down, count, or guesstimate. It was probably a lot higher than that. His nicknames, El Padron, El Señor, El Doctor, and yes, he was in fact killed by Los Pepes, a group that some people say may have had some connections to the U.S. government. Now, that's what we have there, but let's look a little
more into it a little bit.
Let's get deeper.
Let's present a little deeper the case of Chapo. Now, Chapo, they suggest, is worth $3 billion or had annual drug sales of around $3 billion. The death toll, I'm going to skip down to that for a moment. Thousands. We know that 80,000 have died in Mexico over the last decade. How much of that is attributable to Sinaloa? We'll never know exactly. Most notorious forms of murder. If you have been into the deep, dark corners of the web, you could see things like this live on YouTube, decapitations. This is a video. It's all we're going to be able to show you. It's awful. You don't want to see more. Let's go back to Chapo's fact sheet for 1 second. He facilitates up to 40% of illicit drug narcotics into the United States. Now, I'm going to tell you, Buck, I'm not going to do this in my words. I'm going to do it in the words of the DEA because I'm going back to the geographic reach. According to the DEA, Agent Phil Jordan, he runs the El Paso branch. He said the difference between Chapo and Escobar is Chapo was an entrepreneur. He was a businessman. He had vision. He had presence on several continents, from Europe, the United States, to Australia. And his quote is this: El Chapo is the Don Corleone of drug lords. He was better than Escobar. And the Sinaloa cartel was more of a business than a bunch of gangsters.
I have to tell you, his historical memory may need a little jogging. I'd like to do that for him now. He also may want some funding for his office down there in El Paso. Annual drug sales, $5.6 billion for Escobar. That is, again, estimated. We're talking about the late 1980s into the 1990s here, by the way. So 3 decades ago is when this is happening. You'll notice that there are some really close comparisons as to the level of drugs, the amount of money we're talking about here. His geographic reach, North and South America, Europe. Some people said it stretched into Asia as well. 4,000 deaths. That's just attributed to him alone. If you actually look at cartel violence in Colombia during that period, it was in the tens of thousands a year. They couldn't even keep track of it. It was so widespread. Most notorious forms of murder, car bombings. He blew up a commercial airliner. We can show you some of the aftermath footage of that. The Avianca flight. It killed 107 people. He actually blew this thing out of the sky. Why? Because he was trying to kill a presidential candidate. That's right. Nobody in Colombia, and I mean nobody, was safe from Pablo Escobar. He was willing to try to kill the entire Supreme Court of Colombia. That assault actually almost succeeded in broad daylight in the middle of the Capitol, killing the entire Supreme Court. He's also a guy who was well known for torturing people himself while he was on a cell phone call. Didn't seem to care very much about any of that. He facilitated 80% of total cocaine trade into the U.S. in the 70s and the 80s. So